Okay, good morning, everyone. So, as I have already told that today our topic of discussion will be mainly focusing on polymorphism. Then it is followed by how we can implement polymorphism with the help of pointers concept in C++ and virtual function concept in C++. Those who are already aware about the Java programming, they have already implemented a polymorphism concept in Java. But in C++, the polymorphism concept implementation is little bit different from Java. That is the main difference. In inheritance, there is very little difference in terms of syntax in between Java and C++ inheritance implementation. But conceptually, or the base concepts in Java inheritance and C++ inheritance are similar. But in case of polymorphism, the base concept is quite different, because in Java we don't need to take the help of pointers, because there is no concept of pointers in Java. We will take the help of object reference to do the polymorphism in Java. But in C++, we will have to take the help of the pointer, and with the help of virtual function. Virtual function can be also implemented with the help of pointers. Okay, so the base is the pointers in C++, then virtual function, and then by using the virtual function we are able to implement polymorphism. So it is little bit you can say it's modified compared to a Java implementation. Okay, but one thing I want to convey to you that till now you have already implemented polymorphism in your previous programs. In previous couple of programs, you have already implemented the basic concept of polymorphism or function overloading. You have already implemented. When I will show you the code of the basic polymorphism, you can understood that you have already implemented the polymorphism. So let's share my screen first. This is one of the very important concepts from the object-oriented programming perspective, because each and every object-oriented programming must follow a pi principle: P for polymorphism, I for inheritance, and E for encapsulation. The other two principles we have already covered in our previous classes, inheritance and encapsulation. Today, our main objective is to complete the first principle. Is also one of the most important principles in object-oriented programming point of view. It is polymorphism. Okay, and it is also referred as function overloading. Okay, so let's share my screen. I hope that this PPT is visible to everyone. My screen is visible to everyone. So polymorphism, what is polymorphism? That is the first thing that you need to understand. Then we are going to gradually move into the details of its implementation through C++ coding. Okay. So what is polymorphism? Polymorphism is a crucial features, or you can say a very necessary features from every object-oriented programming point of view. It may be C++, it may be Python, or it may be Java. All the OOPS language must follow this polymorphism principle. Okay, it is a part of that pi principle. So this polymorphism is actually consists of a Greek word, a Greek term, poly plus morphos. Okay, the Greek term tells you poly plus morphos. Poly plus morphos. Both are Greek terms. Okay, together it will call polymorphism. Okay, when it will join together, it will call polymorphism. Now, what is poly? What is morphos? That we need to tell. So poly represents many. Okay, and morphos, which represents forms. So poly plus morphos means polymorphism. When we will call polymorphism together, then we can say it is many forms, right? So polymorphism is such a concept where we can say it is a process which has a single interface and multiple forms, which has single interface and multiple forms. So by the help of this single statement, you are able to represent the actual meaning of polymorphism single interface and multiple forms. Okay. So polymorphism is about an object's ability to provide context when methods or operators are called on the object. So while we are calling the objects, or while we are connecting the objects by invoking the corresponding method of different classes, okay, then only this polymorphism concept is going to be applied. How? That we are going to learn. And this polymorphism is not only related with the functions or methods, it is also related with the operator. Because in our previous class, if you remember that we have covered the operator overloading. That means the same operator will be overloaded by multiple different forms or different tasks. So that means operator overloading and function overloading or method overloading, what I will say, are also referred to as polymorphism, right? So the overloaded member functions which are selected for invoking, they have to match which object of which class is going to be created, and that object is invoking its own class method with the same name. That is the overall concept of polymorphism. So let's tell you the major classification of polymorphism. Polymorphism can be divided into two types. Polymorphism can be divided or classified into two types. Try to understand. Polymorphism is broadly classified into two types. The first type is called compile time polymorphism. Okay, and the second type is called runtime polymorphism. Both are important, but runtime is more popular than compile time polymorphism. But both are important. Okay, both are used significantly. Now the thing is that this compile time polymorphism is also called early binding or static binding. This compile time polymorphism is also called early binding, okay, or static binding, whatever you say. The another names of compile time polymorphism. And this runtime polymorphism is also called late binding or dynamic binding. So in the examination, the question will come in any form. So you have to understood which kind of polymorphism they are asking, and you have to give your answer accordingly. Right? These are the different names of different kind of polymorphism or different types of polymorphism. Now let's consider a situation. Okay. So under this compile time polymorphism, we actually divide it into another two kinds, which you have already covered. That is, the first one is operator overloading, which we have already done. And the second one is function overloading. Okay. So these are the two kinds under a compile time polymorphism or early binding or static binding. Now, this runtime binding or runtime polymorphism can be implemented with the help of one kind, and that is called virtual functions. This is different from virtual base class. Don't mix it with the virtual base class concept. Virtual base class concept is different from virtual function concept. So this is an overall classification in terms of C++ polymorphism concepts. Okay. So polymorphism is first divided into two prime types: compile time polymorphism and runtime polymorphism. Compile time polymorphism can be implemented with the help of these two concepts, operator overloading and function overloading, whereas runtime polymorphism can be implemented based on the concept of virtual functions. And this virtual function is also implemented with the concept of pointers. It cannot implement alone. It can be implemented with the concept of pointers. Okay. So this is the overall classification of a polymorphism concept. Now let's check it out. Today I want to discuss with you the compile time polymorphism or early or static binding. Then if I will get a time, then I will discuss with you about the runtime polymorphism or virtual function. But before the virtual function or runtime polymorphism, I will have to discuss some basic concept of pointers in C++, which is very much similar with the concept of pointers in C programming. But let's make a revise of it, okay? And let's tell you some of the different features, how we can use pointers in C++, right? So let's take one example, how the compile time polymorphism and runtime polymorphism is implemented. Just take a very small code snippet. I'm not writing a full code. I just want to write a code snippet for you. Okay, try to understand. Suppose we have a class A. Now within this class, suppose we have a variable int x, and try to understand. Within a public access specifier, we have defined a method, suppose void sum. Right. Suppose this method I have defined. Try to understand. I am not defining the body of the method. It can be anything. Now we have closed down the class brackets. Now similarly, we have defined another class by inheriting the class A. So we have inherited the class A with the public keyword for easier to understand. I am making it as a different color. Okay. Now within this class B, we have take a variable int y, declare a variable int y, and take the same sum function. So this is a sum function of the base class, right? And this is a sum function of the derived class. I think all of you understood this concept. Okay, derived class. Now, how we can call, the main question is that how we can call the sum function to print the values of objects of both the classes A and B. How do we use this invoking of the sum function? So this sum function is similar in both these classes. It's similarly defined, that there is no difference. Try to understand, there is no difference in the definition of this sum function. Not even return type, not even the type which we are passing. Okay, not even the arguments or parameters. So this function is actually not overloaded. So static binding or compile time polymorphism cannot be applied here. Now, if we call this function, what is actually happened with the help of object? If we call this function with the help of this B object, then we getting the overriding concept, not overloading. We will get the overriding concept. Means this B class sum function overrides the A class sum function. That we have already discussed in the method overriding in inheritance concept, if you remember. But in case of overloading, these concepts cannot be applied. Both the functions are similar as it is. In this case, we cannot apply any kind of compile time polymorphism or static binding or early binding, because there must be some difference in terms of the parameters that we are passing through the function to make it differentiate between these two functions. The rest of the things of the function can be similar. Okay, in case of polymorphism concepts. Let's check it out. Suppose within this void sum, we are passing two variables, int A, int B. I think it is clear to everyone. Now within the second void sum of the derived class, we are passing two variables, float A, comma, float B. Now we can apply our compile time polymorphism or static binding or early binding on this set of code snippet. Why? Because right now the functions are similar, their return types are similar, so their definition names are similar, but their argument types are different. Here, the types of the arguments are integer. Here, the types of the arguments are floats. So we can easily apply a compile time polymorphism or early binding or static binding while we are invoking the member function with the help of objects of these individual classes. We are able to apply the function overloading concept or compile time polymorphism or static binding concepts here based on different types of parameters. Not only types, we can also apply compile time polymorphism by different numbers of parameters. Suppose here in this sum function, we are passing a single parameter of float type, and here we are passing two parameters. So you can say, sir, this time the parameters are similar. The types of the parameters are similar. Yes, the types of the parameter are very much similar in both the functions. So how we can differentiate? Based on the number of parameters. So here we are passing only one parameter, and here we are passing two number parameters. So that in this case, in this way, we can differentiate these two void sum function and apply the compile time polymorphism or static binding. So polymorphism can be applied in two scenarios or two cases. The first, based on number of parameters passing, okay, and the second kind is second type of applying the concept of polymorphism is types of parameters passing. Okay, so these are the major two concepts on which, based on which, we can apply the concept of polymorphism, especially compile time polymorphism. Is it clear to everyone? Is this concept clear to everyone up to this?
Yes, yes.
So both the functions have similar name, but based on the type of the parameters or the number of the parameters, we can distinguish these two functions. That is the main objective that we want to convey. I want to convey to you. And in these cases, in this type of cases, we can successfully apply compile time polymorphism or static binding. Now let's check it out, a full code where we can apply compile time polymorphism. Now then I will tell you the difference between runtime and compile time polymorphism. Okay, let's check it out, the full code of compile time polymorphism first. So here, check out this code. Here, it is a very simple code I have written for you to represent the absolute work of an absolute function. That means the negative value will be converted into a positive type. That absolute value we will have to take, and based on the different types of parameters, look at this statement, different types of parameters, we are implementing the overloading. And why we are implementing the function overloading? That means we are implementing the compile time polymorphism or static binding or early binding. Okay, so try to understand. These are the header files. First, we will declare a function absolute with one single parameter of absolute type, that is var. Its return type is also float. Okay. Now within this function, we have done a simple operation. If the var is less than equal to 0.0, then we will assign the var with minus value. Okay, and then we will return var. So it's an absolute simple function for absolute implementation. Now we are doing the same job with a function with different return types and different number of arguments. Function name are similar. Look, function name are similar, absolute and absolute, exactly similar, but their types of arguments are different. So here the types is float and here the types is integer. Operations are also similar. It will be applied on integer operations. It will be applied on floating values. That is the only difference because types are different. Now from the main method, we simply call the absolute function. This is a float value absolute function. We will pass a -5 to change it into a corresponding absolute value. And here, sorry, these are integer applications and this is a float application. This one is the float application. and this one is the interior application. Okay. So within the float application, we will do 5.5F. It is actually called a binding. This F, you can give F, you cannot give F. It's actually optional. Okay, you can do it. So here we can get the we will invoke both the functions. We will invoke both the functions by using function implemented. This is the function overloading without the concept of class. This is a function overloading without the concept of class. So let's check it out. So this function is running. Both functions have the same name but different types of parameters. Both functions have the same name but different types of parameters. That's why it will have different kind of operations or different kind of forms to implement. Right. Now we will check the second kind, that is types of parameters. Sorry, number of parameters. We have already seen types of parameters, float and integer, two different types. Now we will see number of parameters. In this code, we have implemented number of parameters to function overloading, different number of parameters. So here we have used three similar functions, void, display, and in this display function we have used different numbers of parameters. So in the first display function there are two number of parameters. In the second display function there is a single parameters, and the third display function there is also a single parameters, but here the types are different. So here we have implemented both different number of parameters as well as different types of parameters. Okay, so based on these functions we can implement different number of parameters as well as different types of parameters. Okay, so here simply displayed, there is nothing to tell about the operations. We simply print those numbers which we are passing. So in the function call we are passing according to that value, we are passing the value. So first this function call is for the integer type, this one. This function call is for the double type, this one, and this function call is for the integer and double type. And A and B we have defined here. A is an integer type and B is a double type. So if we run this, it will run correctly and applicable for all the three functions. Clear? Is it clear to everyone? Is it clear to everyone? The functions are similar, but their outputs or their implementation are different. Based on the types of the parameters and based on the number of parameters, we can distinguish these different kind of functions. Is it clear to everyone?
Yes, sir.
Is anyone has any kind of confusion, any kind of question, you can ask me. So these are the two codes I have seen to you to show you the different types of parameters and different numbers of parameters. If anyone has any kind of question, you can ask me.
Both are same, no, sir? Function overloading and polymorphism.
Both are same. Both are similar. But you can implement function overloading either by using class or by without using class. So here first I am going to show you the simple code by you are implementing it without using class. When I am going to show you the runtime polymorphism, at that time I will show you how we can use class to implement a runtime polymorphism. Clear?
Okay, so means it when it comes to the class term, then we say polymorphism, or else we can say function overloading. No.
Yes.
Oh.
Yes. But this function overloading and polymorphism, these terms are simultaneously used. Means if we can say in C++, if we call function overloading or even operator overloading, we can also tell it as a polymorphism. We can tell it, no problem. Okay. But
Okay.
In the question, if it will explicitly mention that you will have to implement a function overloading using a class concept, then you will have to implement it with the help of the class concept. You cannot ignore it. You cannot ignore it. So before I am going to implement the runtime polymorphism, I will have to give you some concepts regarding how we can use pointers in C++. then followed by the concept of virtual function, then only I'm able to implement the concept of runtime polymorphism, because we require the help of pointers and virtual functions while we are implementing runtime polymorphism. So before we are implementing runtime polymorphism, we have to clear our concept on pointers in C++ and virtual functions. So I request everyone to brush up the concept of pointers in C, as well as the pointers which concept which I am going to discuss today in C++. And in next class, we are starting with the concept of virtual function implementation and polymorphism. Okay, so please, if you have any kind of concept, any kind of weakness in pointers in C or C++, you will have to brush it up by these 2 days. Okay. Okay, so let's check out the first and very simple code of pointers in C++, which is very much similar the code of pointers in C. So the representation of the pointers in C++ is similar to C. Okay, so what is a pointer variable? Pointer variable is such kind of variable. It's a derived data type, and it is such kind of variable which stored the address or memory address of another variable. That is a very basic definition of a pointer variable. It is a derived data type. Okay, and it refers to a memory address of another variable. Okay, so that is a pointer variable. So here we have declared a pointer variable, and to declare a pointer variable, we will have to use this operator, star operator. Okay, this star is different from the multiplication operation, and this star will represent here as a pointer symbol, and this ptr variable is a pointer variable which stored the address of another variable, suppose A. Here it is storing the address of A with the help of the ampersand operator. Ampersand is your address of operator. So it will return the memory address where this A variable has been stored with the value of 10. So the memory address can be in hexadecimal format or octal format. In any format, you can print the memory address, but we are not interested to know about the memory address. We are interested to access the value of those variables along with the pointer concept. Why? Because the pointer access, that is memory address access, is much faster compared to your value access. Okay, so that's why it is advantage of using a pointer concept. So here we are printing the value of A, the original value of A, that will be 10. Then we have done a simple operation, start ptr /2. So everyone knows that start ptr is actually represent the dereferencing of the pointers. That means it points or it represents the value of that address which has been stored inside the pointer variable ptr. So if you print ptr, then it will return you the address, and if you print start ptr, it will return you the value at that address. So start ptr has been stored which value of address? The value of A. Okay, so it will be 10 divided by 2, that means 5. So this new modified start ptr will store the value 5 instead of 10. Okay, and here it will print the value of 5. So if we print the ptr value, so you will get the address of the A variable. Let's check it out. If we print the ptr value, we will get the address of the A variable. Let's check it out. Okay, so this is in hexadecimal form. This address has been shown or represented in hexadecimal form, and this is the address of the A variable. In which memory location the variable A has been stored with the value of 10, that address, memory address, will be represented by the help of ptr, because we are storing the ampersand A there. And this is the new modified value of the start ptr, so dereferencing. So if you print ampersand A instead of ptr, it will give the same results, because it will also refer to the address of the memory location of A value. I think this conception is clear. I'm just making it revised for you. This similar conception is applicable for C++. So there is other conception. So I insist everyone to follow, to just revise. If you don't have a C++ books or notes, I have already provided some notes. In that notes, you will get a pointer concept there. So please follow and revise those concepts as pointer arithmetic. It is similar to C programming language. Okay, what is null pointer? What is a pointer arithmetic? Okay, which arithmetic operation is allowed in pointer concept, which are not allowed. So those are actually similar to a pointer concept. So we can also do a ptr plus plus, so it will actually increase the address, increment the address of the variable. We can also do start ptr plus plus. So whether it is possible or not, these arithmetic operations, so that you will have to revise. Okay, I'm not going to discuss all these things because this is very much similar with the C pointer concepts. Okay, so I request everyone to revise those concepts as soon as possible. Okay, how to use pointer in array or array of pointers, whatever you say, then pointer and strings, then pointer to functions. Okay, these are very much similar with the concepts that we have already learned in our C programming language. Okay, so let's check it out, one small program regarding pointer to function. Okay, just I want to make a revision for it for you. So just check it out how we can implement pointer to functions in C++, pointer to functions. Okay, just I want to make a revise of it. Okay, so suppose we are going to what we say, suppose we have first defined a parameter function, suppose void add. Within this function we are passing two variables, suppose int I and j. Okay, now within this void add we'll simply print that variable I, and suppose we are printing the variable like I and j. Okay, so addition is there, so we can print I plus j. Okay, we can print I plus j here. So let's make a statement here that we are printing I plus j. Okay, we are printing I plus j. Now we are defining one more concept, void subtract. There's a little bit difference. I would like to that you are figure it out by yourself, so that will be more interesting. So here I have defined another function, void subtract, where we are performing the same operation in the form of I minus j. Okay, I minus j, right? And in the main method, we have first need to just 1 minute. This concept is a little bit different, and I have found that the concept is a little bit different. So up to arithmetic operations, they are similar. Okay, the concept of functions in C and concept of function in C++ are similar up to arithmetic operation, pointer arithmetic or pointer expression kind of operations. It is similar. So right now I don't want to show you because this concept is different. So I want that you would figure it out by yourself how we can use pointers in function in C++ as well as pointer in arrays. Okay, these two concepts are different, a little bit different. Okay, so I would like to that you should figure it out by yourself. If you don't, then I will discuss it in the next class. Okay, right now I don't want to discuss it. I just leave it for you, right? So I'm just skipping this code, and I would like to go into our next concepts that is also very new to you, that how we can use pointers to derive class. That means while we are implementing pointers, or while we are using pointers in derived class concept, that means in inheritance concepts, how we can use that concepts. Okay, how we can use this concepts. So try to understand this concept is also very important. Everyone try to understand these things. So this concept is called pointers to derived class concept. Okay, so we can use pointers not only to the base objects but also to the objects of the derived class. Okay, so that is the concept. So pointers to objects of a base class are type compatible with pointers to objects of a derived class. Therefore, a single pointer variable can be made to point to objects belonging to different classes. So here you will see I have first defined a base class BC. BC is our base class, right? So here I have defined a simple void display method of the BC class. Still, I am not using any concept of pointers here, right? Now I have defined another class, which is a derived class of this BC class, that is D. Okay, so single inheritance I have applied here, and within this D class I have defined same function void display with a similar display of D value as well as a new value of D, right? Now in the main function where we actually apply the concept of pointers, try to understand. So here we have to first create the pointer to class BC type variable. The pointer to class BC type variable. So start BPTR is a pointer to the base class BC. I think it is clear to everyone. So this pointer BPTR points to the address of the base class BC. Okay, the objects to the base. Actually, address class doesn't have any physical implementation. So the objects of that class has that physical implementation. I think this conception is clear to everyone. Class is a abstract data type, you can say. It's an abstract concept. It is not a physical implementation. Objects of that class is a physical implementation. So this pointer type should be associated with the object of that class. Then only this pointer can work. Is it clear to everyone? This pointer should associate with the object of that class BC. Then only it can work. Why? Because pointer must refer to a object which has a physical memory address. Class doesn't have any physical memory address, so you cannot directly apply the pointer on class. You can apply the pointer on the object of that class. So this first we have declared the pointer BPTR of this class BC, and we have just in the next line we have declared the object base of this class BC. And here we are storing the address of the base object into the BPTR pointer of that class. Is it clear to everyone? Are these three lines clear to everyone? While we are assigning the address of the base object within the pointer of this class, are these three lines clear to everyone? Tell me. This is very important. This is very, very important.
Again, sir, again the first line, BC pointer.
We actually declare a pointer BPTR.
Again, repeat this.
That points. We actually declare the pointer BPTR which points to the class BC. But the thing is that class is an abstract data type. It is an abstract concept. So a pointer cannot point to an abstract value. It can point to a such kind of object which has some physical implementation, means which has some memory address. That is the concept of a pointer variable. So that's why if we have to take some kind of physical concept of a class, then we have to create the object of that class, because object is the only thing which has a physical concept of physical memory occupation. So we have created the base object of the BC class. Now the address of this base object is stored into the pointer of this BPTR class. So that actually this BPTR pointer is now points to the address of the base object of this BC class. Is it clear?
Yes, yes, got it.
So this BPTR now has the capability or you can say the power to access the member of this base class object BC. So which are the member of this BC class? B and display. So how it can access? By simply these things. I think this symbol is clear to everyone. So BPTR is a pointer that access the variable B with the help of this symbol, arrow, right hand side arrow, is equal to 100. So we have given the value, or we have initialized the variable B or the member of the BC class B. B is the BC class member and D is the D class member or the inherited class member. Okay. So inherited class member we cannot access by the help of BPTR. Why? Because BPTR should store the object address of this D class. Then we are able to access this one. So here BPTR stores the address of the base class. So that's why the base class object. So that's why BPTR is arrow 100 and BPTR arrow display. In this way, we can access both the members of the base class BC. Okay. So this is quite different because in normal cases, we will access the members with the help of object directly by using dot operator. But here we are accessing, instead of object, we are accessing by the help of pointer variable, which will store the address of the object. So till now, we have learned several programs which will store the address of a variable. But here it is the first program. Instead of storing the address of a variable, this program will show how we can store the address of an object of a class. And by the help of that pointer variable, which will have the address of an object of a class, how we can access the corresponding members of that class. So similarly, in the derived class D, we have created an object DER, that is a derived class object, and we are storing the address of this derived class object DER into the BPTR. BPTR is again more modified. Okay, you can take another. Actually, I have used the same base class pointer to store the address of both. Okay, so we don't need to use two different pointers because it has been modified with a base class pointer. So this BPTR is now stored the address of the object of the derived class DER. Now this derived class extending both the base class and its own properties according to inheritance rule. So right now this BPTR has the capability or power to access both the members of the base class as well as the derived class. Clear? This BPTR is now have the power to access both the member of the base class BC and the derived class D according to the inheritance principle. So here BPTR is accessing the value B. So remember, B is the value of the base class, and this BPTR accessing the display function of the B class. Now the problem is that whether BPTR is eligible to access the member of the D class or not. So I have said according to our logic in previous cases, the BPTR is storing the address of the derived class object, so it should be capable enough to access both the members of the base class and derived class. So whether it is possible or not. So let's check it out. We have just opened this one. So this one open means B is an object of, D is a variable of which class? Derived class. So BPTR storing the address of the derived class. So whether it is possible or not, because BPTR is a pointer of the base class. So it is not possible. So class BC has no member named D. So whether you are storing the address of the object of the derived class D into the BPTR, but BPTR is still a pointer of the BC class. So it will not allow you to access the derived class members with the help of the pointers of the base class. So how we can access derived class member? So similarly, you will have to create a pointer of the derived class. Just like the pointer of the base class, you have to create a pointer of the derived class where you have to store the derived class object address separately. And then this pointer has the capability to access the values with the help of this DPTR arrow display. DPTR arrow D equal to 400 can be also possible, or you can also access in such a way. Okay, if you remember, you can also access in such a way both the members. Okay. So this is the concept. Okay. So this is the concept. So here at the first, so I'm making it an overall concept of this program again. First, we actually creating a BPTR which points to the base class object. And second, when BPTR is made to point to the derived class object, we are creating that one. Secondly, we are BPTR to points to a derived class object. But both the times it executed this display method. It executed this display method. So BPTR now points to a derived class object, and this BPTR now points to a base class object. These are true. But whether these two display methods are displaying the BC class, now let's check it out. So this display method DPTR points to the derived class object, and this BPTR points to a base class object. BPTR points to the derived class object. So these two has been printed, and this DPTR points to the derived object. So this one. So which one is? So this B and this is B and D. But in both the cases, this display function will execute this base class function. See, check it out. Look, base class function B. It will not accessing D. It will display only B, because within the display function of the derived class, both B and D should be printed. So here only B will be printed. B has been printed. So that means, yeah, it will executing the base class display function in both these cases. Okay. So in the next case, while we are creating the pointer to the derived class separately, which will store the address of the derived class, then it has a capability to access a display function or the member of the derived class itself. So this shows that although a base pointer can be made to point to any number of derived objects, it cannot directly access the members defined by a derived class. So it can point to the derived class object. The base class pointer can point to the derived class object. That is true. But base class pointer has only capability to access its own members, not derived class members. It can point to a derived class object, but it cannot access the derived class member. It can access its own members in both these cases. So if you want to access the derived class member with the help of pointers, then we have to create a pointers of the derived class separately, which will store the address of the object of the derived class, and then you are able to access the derived class members. Clear? Is it clear to everyone?
Yes.
This concept is very, very important. Pointers to derived class. Everyone, please practice. I'm uploading these codes in your Google Classroom. Everyone, please practice this code. And if you feel any kind of problem, please ask me in the next class. So in the next class, I am going to show you some more codes regarding pointer to function, pointer to arrays, and then pointer to objects. This I also want to show, because all this concept will be applicable in virtual functions, okay, and runtime polymorphism. So that's why I will need to show it. Okay. So please practice. Today we have already covered the compile time polymorphism, function overloading. Then we have checked some of the basic codes of pointers in C++, and we have learned the concept of pointer to derived class. If anyone has any question, you can ask me. Anyone has